Tov, Shavua 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 Tov. A good week of peace, with gladness, rain, and joy increase. A good Tavach, Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov. That's it. Yeah, you like that? Okay, time to light the Hanukkah candles, Mara. Take that one, thank you. And if you have your Hanukkah candles at home, if you haven't already, you can get them ready. Do you want to do this one? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavoteinu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh ma'ozor Yeshuati lechana el shabeach. This one, Tikon beit tefilati v'sham toda nizabeach le'et tachin matbeach mitzar hamnabeach azegmor b'shir mizmor Chanukah tamizbeach azegmor b'shir mizmor Chanukah tamizbeach. Happy Hanukkah, everyone.
Alrighty.
I'll turn it over to Auntie A, who will introduce our entertainment, our comedian for the night. Thank you so much, Ellie, and everybody else for joining us.
You're muted.
Can you hear me
Am I
now?
supposed-
Can you
Now
hear
we
me
can.
now? Can you hear me now? Welcome, everybody. I'm so happy to have Eli Lebowicz here, our stand-up comedian originally from Chicago, but now lives in New York City. He started performing stand-up comedy while attending YU in New York. There, he won the school's annual stand-up comedy contest in 2009 and is also the co-creator and head writer of the Quipster, the Yeshiva University's first satire publication. So I'm sure he'll tell us more about that. Since then, Eli has been performing comedy clubs all around New York City. Not right now, of course. College campuses. I don't know about that right now either. And all along the East Coast, including our shul. So we are really happy to have him tonight, and I'm gonna take it over to you, Eli.
Thank you. Sorry, 1 second. Oh, thank you so much for having me. Now I have to throw in some YU jokes because you mentioned it, which I wasn't planning on doing. No, thank you very much for having me. I'm so happy to be here, especially since I don't have to leave anywhere. It is really nice to do shows over Zoom. When you read my bio, it's like, it just feels sad now. It's like, oh, he does shows all over the world at all Pesach programs, shul dinners, shul events, and other things that don't really happen in person. So thank you for the reality check. Appreciate it. Doing comedy over Zoom is a bit of a challenge, mostly because you can't really get real responses. We have some people unmuted just for my sake, but honestly, like, you don't really see any response. You don't hear any response. You just see people going like this. And the only time you really get a real, feedback is if someone gets upset at you afterwards and they email you. And I told my rabbi, and he said, now you know how I feel. So thank you. Okay, we got one person unmuted. Good to know, because we got one person. Can we get a few more people unmuted? Because that 1 or 2 laughs is not going to do it. Adrian, can you thank you. Adrian, can you unmute yourself? Do you mind? I feel like you're Connie.
I'm right here. I'm getting everybody unmuted here.
You're unmuting them. Okay. I don't do it for the ego. It's more just so I don't think this is a shear. That's the hope. People are like, oh God. Anyways, this week's Parsha. No, it's funny. I actually had a joke about last week's Parsha where, it's a story where, Yaakov gets in this fight with the angel, and the angel says, what's your name? And he says, Yaakov, Jacob. And the angel says, no, from now on, it's Israel. And I feel like Yaakov's probably would have said fine, but I'm still going to have to go by Yaakov at the bank and the doctor's office. So beat that, Rabbi. That's I hope people are drinking something tonight, because, Chabad's slogan is it's Purim somewhere. So go for it. I know, I do have a whole segment of jokes in Tanakh, of in the Torah of these stories, and oh boy, now we got the echo situation going on. Zoom comedy is going great, guys. Zoom comedy is where it's at. It wouldn't be a Jewish event without technical difficulties, you got to say, because you knew when it was a Jewish ever since grade school when they told you there's going to be a video. And they had the teacher wheel in that video cart with a TV on it, and you knew it was going to be a 45-minute video. It was going to take the teacher 2 hours to learn how to use it. So we're doing, this whole COVID situation has really kind of affected things. We're doing this over Zoom. We would normally be in person, and it's so strange. It's affected everything. I'll watch. It's just our culture. It's just changed. I'll watch a horror movie, and instead of yelling at the screen, don't go in there. Now I'm yelling, don't touch the elevator button. It's so weird. Or, you see somebody on Shabbos and Shabbat, and you walk by them, before somebody walked by you and they didn't say anything to you, you're like, oh, what a jerk. He didn't say good Shabbos to me. But now you're like, oh, thank God he didn't breathe on me. This is it's such a weird difference. And also, before this whole situation, if I didn't want to, cook dinner and I just wanted to get takeout, I was considered lazy. But now, if I order takeout 5 times a week, I am a hero for supporting local kosher restaurants. And no, it's nice. And I actually I've done a bunch of shows for schools and shuls and different organizations. Well, so one of the shows I was doing was for a school, and during the show, one of the teachers I saw was making PPE masks during the show. And I got to tell you, in my life, I have never felt less essential. Okay. This guy's a teacher making medical masks for healthcare workers. I am a clown who makes davening jokes. Can you guys come to every show? Because this is fun. No, but honestly. And also, so I do a lot of shows for Jewish organizations, and you got to be really careful with when these times when they tell you, when they try to incentivize you to do it, they'll say stuff like, we can't pay you, but we'll give you jelly donuts. I'm like, maybe. or they say this great line, and you got to be careful, especially during COVID. They say this thing of, it'll be great exposure. And I'm like, ooh, bad choice of words. No. Your name will go viral. It'll spread everywhere. And one of the hardest things about COVID is that these symptoms couldn't be more vague. I mean, it's like cough, fever, chills, anxiety, baldness. I've had it for years. They could have just said Jewish, And in New York, we I don't know if they did this. You're in Silver Spring, right, Maryland?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Some are like, we moved to Canada. No, I'm kidding. But in Silver Spring, Maryland. So in New York, they have this thing where at 7 o'clock during the summer mostly, and during the first several months of this, at 7 o'clock they would cheer for 3 minutes every day for like healthcare and essential workers, and that was really nice, especially since there were some days when I really didn't feel good about myself, and I didn't put on pants until 6:59 p.m. and then at 7 o'clock everyone would cheer, and but you should be honored I'm wearing pants tonight.
Right.
It is, and I know it's been tricky with shul and synagogue, with what we're able to, to have, so, we're living in a strange time when my shul emailed me not to come. Like, what a weird role reversal, honestly. Like, I was really going to come this time.
Orthodox, I assume.
And then, some shuls have started, opening back up a little bit in certain areas, and some shuls have started saying they're only allowed 40% capacity. And I'm telling you, if they need a few more people to volunteer to stay home a few more years, I am willing to jump on that. And I was thinking the number 40 is a really, important number in Judaism. Moses was on Mount Sinai for 40 days. The Jews were in the desert for 40 years. A free Zoom session shuts off after 40 minutes. Really important number. And, I know this has really been challenging for rabbis and for shuls. On the plus side, rabbis are like, well, at least we found a way to stop talking during davening. Like, that's impressive. And, shul gabbais, the guy who decides who's reading the Torah, who's davening, they've had a tough job, because in some communities, in my shul specifically, they don't used to be challenging, and one person does everything. So in the big four, this whole thing, it would be like the guy's like, hey, you want to daven Musaf? And the guy's like, I don't think so. And now it's like, do you want to daven Musaf? Also read the entire Torah and Haftorah. Also, you're building the tent outside. And I've only been to synagogue a few times in this whole time. And when I went over the summer, I said to someone, it's so crazy. This is the first minyan I've been to since Hanukkah. And people were like, wasn't it Purim that things shut down? Yeah. Since Hanukkah. That joke isn't funny after this week, by the way. But anyway. No, but I also, what's tricky about also wearing masks and everything is that at the beginning, they really told everybody, they really told just the N95 masks are just for essential workers. You don't really need to wear one, or they didn't really emphasize it. And then one day they're like, no, everyone needs to wear one all the time. And that's really hard to kind of change the guidelines on us. It's like my really religious school growing up was like, don't talk to girls. And then one day they're like, why aren't you married? I went to a really religious school growing up, and they had boys in one building, girls in another building. And it was always like, we never saw each other unless it was like a huge assembly. So it was always the biggest deal whenever there were girls in the same room. So I would be like to my friends, oh my God, there are girls here. My friends would be like, dude, it's Yom HaShoah, shut up. And I'll be like, all right, okay. Anyway, I was doing great, and then I lost you. No, I'm so sheltered that I thought the term mixed martial arts just meant co-ed martial arts. That's all. Adrian mentioned I went to YU, Yeshiva University. YU actually has this thing. Normally, they have in February, they have a 3-week book sale where they pretend to sell books in Svarim, but it's really just a weird way for men and women to meet each other. It's really hilarious.
Yeah, true.
It's true. I met my wife there. No, but honestly, sadly, not a joke. Anyways, no, but they have this 3-week book sale, and it's so funny because they'll be like guys going there and be like, hey, that Gemara is pretty cute. And you're like just looking. Rihanna had a song from several years ago that said, we found love in a hopeless place. That was written about the YU stars. Anyways, no. So I do, I do a bunch of comedy. I would do shows, for Jewish organizations. I used to travel a lot more, but you guys know what happened. So I would travel, and I would go to different communities. I would go for Shabbos, and then Saturday night would be the show. So I would go to the community. I would go to people's houses for meals Friday night, and people at the meal didn't know I was the comedian. So I get to hear their honest thoughts on the event the next night, where they would be like, "So you're going to this stupid comedy thing tomorrow night?" And I'd be like, "He went to YU. I don't even know if he's that funny." It's also unfortunately, it's just stereotypical where you see somebody with a yarmulke, you're like, this guy's not going to be funny at all. It's burned into our brain for some reason. So, but I do comedy. And when you tell people you're a comedian, there's a lot of pressure to be funny right away. People, all of a sudden are just like, hey, you're a comedian, prove it. And that doesn't happen with other jobs. Nobody is ever like, hey, you're a Moel. Prove it. Right back. And and also, that was a nice introduction that I wrote, but thank you. No, but I would do, a lot of times when I perform at shul events, I get introduced by the rabbi, or I have to follow Tehillim, and that's a little tough sometimes. I literally performed at an event 5 years ago. It was August of 2015. It was right after the Iran deal passed, so everyone was really on edge, kind of like right now. And the rabbi finishes his speech by saying, I am so scared for the state of the world. I am so terrified for the Jewish people. I know that Mashiach, the Messiah, is coming, but I'm frightened. Please welcome the comedian, Eli Lebowicz. You gotta be like, hey! Let's hear it for the rabbi, folks. No. And also, I'm so happy that you guys are receptive to having comedy, because some places you talk to, they're just not into the idea of it. They always, when I talk to places about having a comedy night, they'll always tell me horror stories of previous comedy nights that didn't go well. They'll be like, well, we had a comedian in 1985 and he swore the entire time, and it was the worst Tisha B'Av event we ever had. And I do very clean material, because look at me, even if I told a dirty joke, it really wouldn't be believable. If I was I was hooking up with this one girl, you'd be like, no, you weren't. You go back to YU, buddy. I think at a certain point, we're going to have to tell everybody that hooking up doesn't mean networking anymore, by the way. When relatives of mine are being like, hey, your cousin's in town, you should hook up with her. And I'm like, that doesn't mean that anymore. Okay. No, so I do very clean material. I do very clean material because I know, first of all, it's just who I am. But also, when I would go to comedy clubs, comedians are usually very dirty. They'll say things that are much more inappropriate and vulgar, and they'll say things that I just can't relate to as an Orthodox Jew. They'll get up on stage and be like, how when you're at a strip club in Vegas doing cocaine, or not even dirty stuff, just stuff I can't connect with. They'll be like, how you're at a McDonald's? I'm like, let me stop you right there. Okay. I need a comedian who'll say something I can actually relate to. I need a comedian who'll get up on stage and be like, how when you're peeing and you sneeze and your yarmulke falls in the toilet? I'll be like,
Terrible.
Not accurate, okay? I'm just saying. By the way, that joke is missing the real live experience, because if this was a live show, all the women would turn to the men and go, really happened to you? And all the men would be lying and say, no, it does not. But that's why some people wear black hats. Anyways. No, but people ask if I wear a yarmulke, on stage or in real life. And I said, yeah, because if I did this, you would be like, oh, obviously he's Catholic. I'm like, no, I am well aware how Jewish I am and how I look. Like, and I live in, like I said, I live in New York, which is a pretty accepting city, but I still get weird comments. I was walking to the street once and somebody said to me, keep it moving, Yarmulke, which I guess is the most neutral anti-Semitic comment. Like, what do? You too, crucifix. I don't really know how to respond to you. Another guy asked me once when the bus was coming, and I was like, I don't know. He's like, I get it. You're Jewish, so you think you're better than me? And I was like, yeah, but not for that reason, okay? And but no, a friend of mine, before this whole thing started, a friend of mine was giving me a ride. And he was driving in a lane, and he cut off like 20 cars to merge into the next lane. And he told me, he said, take your yarmulke off for this. And I said, you're driving a Honda Odyssey, okay? You might as well have a mezuzah on the door, okay? This is practically the mitzvah tank over here. Like, I mentioned, the idea of like, shul and stuff like that, like, you can't really tell him sitting there, but I could tell the rabbi's kind of a taller guy. Like he has more of probably a Hagba build, the guys who like raise the Torah. I have more of a Glila build, the guy who's like roll up the Torah. The guy, I don't understand the guy who does Hagba, raising the Torah at the end. Why does he always have to you only have to do 3 columns technically? Why do you always have to do like 6 or 7? Like they're showing off for the women's section or something. Like, ladies, hey, what's going on? He puts his phone number on the back. And as a guy who does Glila, the rolling up, you can't really show up. You're like, hey, ladies, what's going on? Only took me 6 minutes to realize it wasn't Velcro. So I'm also a Levi, and which means they're the Beit HaMikdash, they're the singers and stuff like that, and I play instruments, but I don't do either of those things. I don't sing and I don't play instruments. So I guess I'll be a guy who takes temperatures in the Beit HaMikdash. I don't really know what the thought is going to be. Okay, yeah, it's okay. That worked on Twitter. It's fine. Anyway, but I mentioned being proud of my Judaism, and it's really true. I am proud of my Judaism, but there are times you want to downplay some of your Judaism. Like when I would fly, again, I know back in the day we used to fly. I would always fly on Sukkot with my lulav and etrog, which is really tough because you're always like self-conscious already. Like I got a daven here, but now I got to carry this giant thing through airport security, and. First of all, you also can't put your bags down. So now you got to go to the bathroom holding a lulav, which just seems inappropriate. Like, people at LaGuardia Airport are just like, what, you've never seen a guy go to the bathroom with a tree before? What's your problem? And now, now I'm walking through the airport holding this giant thing. And the woman says to me at American Airlines, she says, what is that? And I'm like, it's like a religious tree. I don't know. And she says, do you plant it? And I said, no, you idiot. You shake it. Duh. Like, that's the most normal verb that we do, Or sometimes at the TSA security, they say, is this tree that you're carrying dangerous? And I say, not really, except every time I take it out of the bag, I stab myself in the hand. Some of you appreciate that way more than others, and I appreciate that. But also, I realize people that aren't Jewish, probably have this time when they are kind of embarrassed of their religious practices. Like, Catholics have something called Ash Wednesday, where 40 days before Easter, Catholics, they put ashes on their forehead. So whenever I see somebody with ashes on their forehead, I can't help but think to myself, I got to start cleaning for Pesach. Wow, that snuck up on me. Thank you for reminding your Catholic guy. That is, our Pesach was a little bit different, right? Our Pesach was a little bit different. It was a little sadder that we didn't have a full group Pesach thing, but there were some nice things that we got to skip the annoying parts of the Seder that we didn't, from the relatives that we didn't like. You have the four sons and part of the Haggadah. You have the wise son, the wicked son, the simple son, the one who doesn't know how to ask. There's also actually the fifth son. That's the kid who's back from learning yeshiva in Israel for the year, who's like shushing everyone for talking while he slams 6 pieces of matzah down his throat in a matter of 9 minutes. Mm-hmm. And Or the kid who's just like, hey, we're going to say the Mani Shtana in 6 languages now. And you're like, oh my God. I didn't miss that part. So I also just feel like some of the holiday, observances that we had this year weren't, were unnecessary or should have been altered. Like, we have something called, during the summer, there's the 9 days. That's the 9 days. It's, the saddest point of the summer. It's from the beginning of the month of Av until the sad day Tisha B'Av. 9 days where, technically you're not supposed to eat, meat unless it's Shabbos or somebody makes a siyum, finishes a section of the Talmud. And so obviously during the 9 days, a bunch of people always finish a section of the Talmud because they want to eat meat. Because some people hate dairy so much, they're even willing to learn Torah. And, but it also, so the 9 days is this time of year when it's supposed to be like, extra sadness. And I feel like just in 2020, we should have been off the hook with having a 9 days. We didn't really, did we really need another week of like, be extra sad this year? I feel like we could have skipped it. Like, why do we need that in 2020? The same way, like, why do I need to hide 10 pieces of bread around my house the night before Pesach when I know that there's 100 Cheerios in my couch right now? Okay? And and this whole situation started around Purim. Purim people drink a lot Purim night, and even though the real mitzvah is to drink during the day, so a lot of people get carried away. And that means that the only Megillah reading they can go to the next day is the one at 10 a.m. with like 100 kids and like 500 groggers. And you're sitting with a horrible hangover, thinking to yourself, maybe Haman got off easy with death. You're like, oh God. It does not say God's name once in the entire Purim story Megillah reading, but every time it says Haman's name, you're thinking, oh my God, please just make this stop. This is horrible. So Purim was a little weird because this whole thing started like right around Purim. Some people were like more careful, but it was also like we knew something was coming. So Purim, it was strange because like somebody coughed during the Megillah reading, everyone booed that guy. Like it was really strange. And what I love about Purim is like the mishloach mana, the gifts that we give each other. The food gifts, this year we didn't really do that so much. We kind of were just like, hey, you know what? Just give me canned goods, Purell, and toilet paper. That's all I need. And it was tough to get some of that stuff. So, I couldn't get some of the essentials, but thank God I had hundreds of bottles of mini grape juice and candy to last me for years in case this happened. But but we always have, so we have the mishloach, one of the gifts we give each other. I love that stuff. I love getting those gifts, but more than that, I love re-gifting mishloach manot. Let's be honest. Let's be honest, because we all do it. Because you can only make so many. However many you're making, you make your certain amount, and you make your 25 or 50. And by the way, now that people are working from home, we all have that one table where nothing gets done. You're working at this table, kids are at this table, toys are there. It's everything. So at the same table on Purim, we have this one table of all this mishloach we made before. And then you have the stuff you get that you like from people. And then you have the garbage, the stuff you hate, the black jelly beans, the candy corn, the yellow Laffy Taffies, the fruit. You're like, what is this? Like, so then you always get the surprise people who knock on your door and they're like, hey, happy Purim. You're like, oh crap, I didn't know we were that good of friends. Hold on. Just like panic shuffle behind the door and you're like, come on, 2 foods, 2 brachas. What bracha do you make in a banana? Forget it, give him some Chex Mix. One year I'm gonna write my name in a box of raisins and see if it ever comes back to me. And you panic, you try to make this very quickly, this thing of a mishmash, you can't really make it a theme because being unprepared isn't a theme. And all of a sudden, you finally open the door, you're all sweaty and you're like, hey, happy Purim. And they're like, wait, I just gave you these raisins. And that's why on my mishloach manot I write, wishing a happy Purim to you and your family, or whoever you decide to give this to. So, we have all the holidays. Right now we have Hanukkah. Hanukkah is really devoted to eating. Let's be honest, it's all about eating. Like, it's so much a part of our culture, but more so on Hanukkah because Hanukkah's idea is, it's all about the battle against Greek culture, and the Greeks were all about man being in prime physical shape. So on Hanukkah, we eat oily foods to ensure we never become like the Greeks. Okay? I am proud of my heritage. Now pass me a jelly donut. I'll have 3 actually. And I don't know. I also, I think about, also the idea of like the dreidel idea. We take it for, they would, in the Maccabean times, they would play dreidel because they weren't allowed to learn Torah. So like they would pretend whenever the Greeks would come by, they would pretend to play dreidel, which, it sounds nice and sounds like a funny idea, whatever. And it's a good like custom that we have. But like in practice, it doesn't really go well. They say, hey, you Jews weren't learning Torah, were you? No, we were just playing this game where we collect gold coins. That's going to be no, but so we have, the holidays, all the holidays that we had, all the holidays, usually a lot of them are in September and October, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and all that stuff. Rosh Hashanah is 2 days, but you're only really judged on one of them because God does it A through L, M through Z, but you don't know which day. And there are actual customs that we just kind of take for granted that like, some I may be informing you about this, but I've heard these customs, like I've heard a custom on Rosh Hashanah. People have a custom not to eat nuts. Here's why. This is going to blow your minds. The gematria, which is the numerical value of each letter in the word egos, which is walnut, stay with me, is almost the same numerical value of the letters in the word chet, which is sin, without the letter aleph. What? Who made that up? The guy that owns the fish head store? Are you kidding me? And people have this custom to not, they say you don't take a nap on Rosh Hashanah because that means you're going to have a sleepy year, or it means you're a sleepy person. But I love this idea of, what are you doing? You're napping on Rosh Hashanah? What are you, crazy? Now eat your fish head and get out of bed. Like, no, and is there anything worse than after Yom Kippur when people that aren't Jewish, they say to you, I hope you had a nice holiday. Yeah. Do you know what I was doing yesterday? I'm cold. I'm hungry. I'm a bad person. All together now. This one's a little niche, but or you're so focused on how slow the chazan is going that it's permeating to everything, every song is just, you're thinking about that only. Right? You're like, I wish he'd hurry up so we can get a break. The book I brought to shul isn't so great. What page are we on? I can't believe he's going so slow. Thank you very much. No, I am a lady. No big deal. So the thing that scares me the most, by the way, on Yom Kippur, you have a Shamnuz, which is the alphabetical list of things we've done wrong, because that's how Jews do things alphabetically. So the one that scares me the most as a comedian, it's Ashamnu, Baganu. The one that scares me the most is the one called the Latznu, because that means we have made a mockery of serious things. Guys, that's why I was invited tonight, okay? All Yom Kippur is just like Ashamnu, but God knew. I'm the only one who's just like lots new. This is gonna be a while. Lots new. And I was reading the back of the Art Scroll Moxer, the one that I use, and I use it because whatever. I'll tell you why in a second. But the back of the Art Scroll Moxer, it has whole paragraphs for each of those Ashamnus, and the one for lots new literally says, "You have made a mockery of serious things. People have taken things less seriously because of you. People have been entertained by your witticisms to no end." I was reading this to myself thinking, this would make a pretty decent thing on my website, honestly. Like, That's new. I really do try to have a very inspirational Yom Kippur. I'm like you, I'm counting the pages, dividing by 2, thank God. Oh my God, it is, if you still use a Beer and Bomb Moxer, you're probably still on your AOL email address. So good for you guys for being on Zoom. But you're counting the pages, dividing by 2. You get mad at the chazan when you read something that's not bolded. You're like, dude, what are you doing? We could have been 8 pages further by now. And it says, some shuls say these paragraphs. You're like, please don't be some shuls. If I was ever running for office, my campaign slogan would be most congregations omit this. Okay. It's, I have to say for a second, it's been a weird year with everything. It's been a hard year in the United States. It was an election year. I'm not going to make any jokes about the election, except for the fact that, things are really tough in America when shuls in Israel are saying, let's say a prayer for the United States. All I will say, and Adrian warned me again, but all I will say is that, this administration, the Trump administration, to me, there's a lot of great things for Israel and stuff like that. But to me, it really felt like a sukkah that blew over on the second day of the holiday. And all that's left was like 1.5 walls and some schach hanging over. And you're sitting in this sukkah and you're like, I'm really not sure this sukkah is still kosher. And they're like, and your dad's like, stop making fun of the sukkah. It's good for Israel. Anyway, no, that's what, that should be decent. No, so I mentioned all the holidays that we have, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, at least those are name brand holidays. And they came out on weekends this year, a lot of the holidays. But, when you have to miss work after Yom Kippur because of Sukkot or Simchat Torah, it gets really, really tenuous where it's really hard when you have to walk into your manager's office and you're like, hey, so I'm going to need 2 days off next week. That's fine. You'll just make up the time the week after. I'm going to need another 2 days. Also, why? What's that holiday called? Happiness of the Torah. Frankly, that sounds made up. But don't worry, there's no holidays for like 6 months, but I will need to leave by 2 on Fridays. So it's impossible to explain Shabbos, Shabbat to people that aren't Jewish. It's so hard. What do you say? As an Orthodox Jew, I just say people are like, can you drive? I'm like, no. Do you write? No. Do you electricity? No. I'm like, do you go to the bathroom? Like, technically, no. It's so hard. Especially now that Shabbos is shorter in the winter, you just all of a sudden, they're like, why do you have to leave so early? I don't understand. Sunset isn't until 4. But you're like, yeah, but I got to go home and cook and shower and argue with my spouse. It's a whole thing. And people, they just don't get it. And it's just why? Why can't you work till 4:30? And you're like, because at sunset I become Amish. That's the only explanation I can give. Because the verse in the Torah, it says 6 days of the week you shall work, and the 7th day you shall play board games and have arguments about things you could have Googled. Okay, that is I have to say. I had one of my cousins over for Shabbat meal years ago, and he wasn't so familiar. He didn't really do a lot of Shabbat meals. So I forgot to tell him, we had all these people over for a meal, and then we went to wash for hamotzi, for bread. And we didn't tell him that we don't really talk after washing and whatever. And so he's sitting at this table with 12 people around. Remember what that was like? And all of a sudden, everyone's quiet. He's like, oh, this is really awkward. So he's making conversation, so what does everyone do? And we're like, shh. He's like, what does everyone do? And so on Shabbat, it's so challenging. One of my favorite things is something called Amir El Akum. This is when if you want a non-Jew to do something for you, you're not supposed to tell them directly. So you have to hint at this, you're playing a game of 20 questions. It's God's way of saying, if you're going to kind of cheat and use a loophole here, I want this to be as hilarious as possible. You forgot to turn your air conditioner off, and you're like, hey, is it hot in here? Sorry, on. You're like, is it hot in here? And they're like, are you hitting on me? I think we got to find a new neighbor, honey. Honestly, or if you want a non-Jew to kill a bug for you, technically you're not supposed to tell them either, hey, I need you to kill this bug. So now all of a sudden you have to pretend like you're in the mafia performing a hit. And you're just like, hey, see this thing? I want it gone. You want me to kill it? I don't want to know any details. Just have it taken. It would be nice if it wasn't there when I came back. Okay. No. But my favorite has to be, the best thing of Shabbos has to be something called Jewish 5-second rule. A regular 5-second rule is when food falls on the floor, women can wait about 5 seconds, they can still eat it. Guys can wait about 3 weeks and they can still eat it. Maybe not. Jewish 5-second rule is when you go to the bathroom on Shabbos, you leave the bathroom, you turn the light off. You're like, oh shoot, 5-second rule, turn it right back on. Lots new. The rabbi's like, I do not sanction that. The rabbi will be like, we will have a shir about Hilchot Shabbat afterwards. Get the disclaimer. But I also realized that the best time to start a job, if you're, is right after Shavuot, because you have 3 months of being a normal person. 3 months where, you're wrapping up an interview and they're just like, oh, that sounds great. Okay, so you'll start next week. Anything I should know about you? Anything you want to tell me? And you're like, nope. And in your head, you're like, in September, I'm insane. And so I did some shows, I did some shows in Israel last year, last Pesach in 2019. I did some shows in Israel. Me, my wife, and my son, we flew to Israel. Some people have the custom to, my son was 3 years old. He was like 1 at the time, 1.5 at the time. So some people have the custom to kiss the ground in Israel. My son licked the ground, so that's exciting. What's interesting, I think he just came home. So he was like, but anyways, so I did some shows in Israel. Me and my wife, we did not fly El Al this time because we've flown El Al before. And the time before that, we flew El Al. And, I forgot what flying El Al was like. There were like babies crying, people davening, people smoking. It was like, somebody took the subway in New York and was like, let's make this a 12 to 14 hour experience. Okay. There was like a mariachi band that started playing the guitar halfway through the flight. This was, and I was, last time, so I was checking my bags and I was reading the signs for El Al and I saw the tagline. It said, El Al, it's not an airline, it's Israel. I feel like a more accurate slogan should be, El Al, it's not an airline, it's an Egged bus with wings. It's like a kosher restaurant just with bigger bathrooms. They have the El Al security guy, security people asking these questions, like they're asking these questions, which is designed to make you feel like this is gonna be a really safe flight, but all it inevitably does is make me feel like a bad Jew. They ask you these questions. Do you know what Parsha it is? That's not really a fair question to ask in 2020. Okay, I don't even know what book we're on. Okay, like also I didn't know this was going to be on the final. Or they ask you the other one, where do you go to shul? Where do you go to synagogue? And you're like, I mean, there's a place I go to for Kiddush. You're not going to tell my parents about this, are you? An irreligious Israeli guy who's like, I was like, oh, where do you go to the synagogue also, buddy? Like, I had no idea. Like, or they ask you the other one, who are you visiting in Israel? Where are you visiting? And you're like, oh, crap. Listen, I did not tell those relatives I was coming. Could we just keep it? This is supposed to be a quick trip. I do not have time to bring Listerine in cereal to my cousins in Beit Shemesh. Okay. Did not tell anyone. That's why I was so happy. Or they ask you the other one. They say, "Did anyone ask you to bring anything?" Only every person I've ever met in my entire life. It's a bigger red flag if they say, "Did anyone not ask you to bring something?" That guy's a terrorist. But also, that's why I was so excited. Last year when they had the Bereshit moon lander, there's an unmanned mission to the moon, and I'm so excited for one day for there to be a manned mission to the moon. and they're going to have a press conference, and all these Israeli astronauts are going to say, we're so excited to be the first Israelis to go to the moon. And then one person's going to raise their hand and say, do you mind bringing a few things to the moon with you? Just a few things. And I actually just saw, Pfizer, a bunch of Pfizer vaccines just landed in Israel last week. I saw a picture, and, all the vaccines clapped when they landed, and it was really nice. Some of you would get that joke more than others. But so all of a sudden, so the LL security people, they have this nice disarming Hebrew. It's not like the Hebrew teachers I had growing up, whose qualifications were not very thorough. They were just like, are you Israeli? Yes. Are you out of your mind? Of course. Great, you're teaching 5th graders. Can you throw a desk at a kid? You'll get a bonus at the end of the year. And, but like, it's still better than the screening process of a shotgun of a matchmaker when they're trying to set people up. They're like, are you a guy? Yes. Are you a serial killer? No. Great, I have the perfect girl for you. Like, it's crazy. Oh, by the way, on that note, I'm as an Orthodox Jew, like I said, I went to YU, so a lot of like Orthodox proposals are so awkward. Regular proposals are just like, will you marry me? Yes, great, and then they kiss or whatever. Orthodox proposals are just so awkward. They're just like, will you marry me? Yes. Awesome. I'm gonna go make some phone calls. I'll see you in 3 to 4 months, depending on how religious we are. Also, this was a total surprise, even though we already had the hall booked and I picked out the ring myself. But it's astounding. I will say, so I'm almost done here. Some of you are like, this is a free show, but it's not a free show. But anyway, this was fun. By the way, props to everybody for coming, even though there's no food, because Jews woke up like Jews. I mentioned Jews and food. We eat. I said the holidays. Hanukkah, all about eating, and also the holidays in Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and Erev Yom Kippur, post Yom Kippur, the break, Sukkot, all about eating. And we feel bad about how much we eat, even though we encourage it all the time. How we feel bad about the eating? The zodiac sign for the month of Tishrei in September is a scale. Okay, that should tell you a little bit of stuff. You didn't get that. Ask people later, because that's a good joke. No, so certain Orthodox people have new frum rules about being more religious and stuff like that. Like, and I didn't know these rules. Sometimes, I asked a guy, I said, how is your wife? And he said, you're not supposed to ask someone, how's your wife? You're supposed to say, how's shalom bayis? Like, how is the peace in the home? And I said, a simple not great would have sufficed, okay? No, my wife and I, we went to a marriage workshop. Everything's fine a few years ago. It was my wife and I and 2 other couples. One couple had been engaged for a week, and I guess things were really hard. And one couple had been married for like a week, 2 weeks, and we were the seasoned veterans, having been married about a year and a half. So I remember one of the exercises they said was write something down about your spouse that annoys you. I know you're all thinking, can you just get in a fight on the way home? Like, why do you need? And the other 2 couples were so adorable. They were just like, we can't think of anything. My wife and I are in the back. We need more paper over here. How high do you want us to go? Should we go to 50 or 100? All right, you guys, my name is Eli Lebowicz. I thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. You guys were such a great audience. I this was really a delight. Thank you so much. Eli Lebowicz, you can find me on social media at Eli Lebowicz, spelled terribly in this way. Thank you. Tell people, if you don't mind, my name is very much spread word of mouth, in terms of comedy. So you can tell people there's funny comedy over Zoom. There's more than just music and concerts and stuff like that. Thank you so much for having me, and happy Hanukkah and Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Eli. Happy Hanukkah. That was wonderful. I was laughing the whole time. Thank you, everyone.
Almost his girlfriend. Is that the next one?
Happy Hanukkah.
Also, no Zoom meeting ends normally, so everyone just like, is this over? That's really how all Zooms are.